Welcome to the next in our series of Meet the Experts. And for this session, we're joined by divorce and breakup coach, Tori Lucas. Thank you for joining us, Tori.
Thank you for having me.
So for those who don't know, could you explain a bit about the role of a divorce coach?
Yes, of course. So the role of a divorce coach is predominantly to support the client through the entire process of divorce from start to finish. I offer them a variety of tools and techniques to get through the various stages that they might have to go through. There is a general assumption that a divorce coach really is there just for the emotional side of the divorce. And of course, a lot of what I do is that. But I also help with the practicalities surrounding divorce as well. And that could be anything from helping manage the process with the children, how they're coping, things like a For Me, helping to fill that out, working out what they need to collate to be able to fill the form out. I can also attend FDR hearings with my client if they're feeling quite anxious or overwhelmed in that process. It really very much depends on how that client is feeling at the time. So where they need me, I can usually step in. But I think what I want to sort of get across is that, yes, I am here to help with the emotional problems, but also the practical problems that come with divorce.
Would you say there's a sort of typical type of client for a divorce coach?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you get clients coming to me through all stages of the process. There is an assumption sometimes there's a lot of my clients are women, and that's not necessarily the case. I also have male clients too. And there's also an assumption that it would be the respondent that comes to me rather than the applicant. And again, strangely enough, that's not the case. You know, you might think it would be, but it's not. In fact, I have a client at the moment that has filed for divorce and is struggling hugely with the feelings of guilt that he's experiencing, how he's going to cope with children and their feelings towards him. So there is no one set client at all. It very much depends. And also you can have clients going through the exact same stage of divorce with similar backgrounds, similar scenarios, but they handle it very differently. So you can have one client who's coping quite well in the outset and the client that's really not coping at all. And that all really boils down to I think your what I call your map of the world. So how you sort of filter out everything that's going on around you. And your map of the world is based on, you know, probably your upbringing, perhaps your religion, your education. Maybe your parents got divorced, maybe they didn't. So how you react to the divorce process very much depends on your background, really, and how you cope. So to say there's one definite client, absolutely not. Everyone's very different, and everyone's different with how they cope.
So how would you approach someone who's uncertain about divorce coaching?
So, and you probably see this in your line of work, unfortunately, there is still a bit of a stigma around divorce in totality. And also people don't like to say they need help. So if anyone's quite reluctant to see me, initially I sort of suggest to them they have a 30-minute consultation with me that will be on the phone where I can talk to them in more detail about what I can do to help them. It's a free call, so there's no obligation, it's risk-free, and they're able to tell me a little bit more about their situation and I can tell them how I might be able to help them. There's still very much a very stiff British upper lip approach to coaching and therapy in general, I find, certainly with clients that have come to me, but they see once they start working with me that, you know, with gentle help and stepping stones, I can get them to a much better place. I think the reluctance is based upon the fact that they've always had a certain way of doing things. So they have a coping mechanism that's inbuilt from a young age, and that's how they do it. So trying to move them away from something that they're used to doing all the time can be quite tricky. But, you know, with time and with gentle baby steps, you definitely are able to get them sort of through to a happier, brighter future. But it can be a sort of slightly more longer process for someone that's reticent.
I can imagine. I mean, what sort of advice would you give to a newly divorced person sort of nearer the end of the process?
Yeah, so I think, you know, there's an assumption that when you're getting towards the end of the process, you know, you're coping better and therefore you're much more, you know, attuned to the fact that you are getting divorced and your future's going to look very different. But that's not always the case, actually. I've got clients that are still feeling very upset and not coping well with the new changes that have been, you know, put upon them, particularly if they weren't expecting to get divorced in the first place. So my tips would be to, you know, feel all the feelings you're feeling. It's perfectly okay to feel sad. It's perfectly okay to cry. It's perfectly okay to feel angry. You know, don't sort of push down those feelings. You know, let them out and let them out with someone like me, or let them out with a trusted friend or a therapist or a family member, but certainly don't keep them inside. I would also say surround yourself with a handful of really good trusted people, so family and friends that you can talk to on a regular basis and who know how you're feeling and that you can trust. If there is a sort of certain date coming up that you think might be quite sort of triggering, so like an anniversary, for example, I always say to clients, keep busy, plan something ahead, make sure you've got people around you so that you're not sat at home thinking like, what can I do? Make sure you always plan ahead. I also sort of say that keep active. I'm a big fan of exercise, and I think exercising, getting out is a natural mood booster. So keep moving wherever you can, even if it's a gentle walk with friends, just keep yourself active at all times. And like I say, just don't beat yourself up about it. You're going through a really tough time, just accept that, and it is okay to feel sad sometimes. It's perfectly natural, in fact.
Yeah, no, definitely. How would you approach the first session with a new client?
So the first session I would normally suggest is a slightly longer session, because whilst I don't delve right back into their relationship history from years gone by, I do tend to take the talks back to perhaps when things started to go wrong. And the reason I would do that is just to see if there's any areas, possible red flags or things where it's very obvious that there was a breakdown. And the reason I do it is purely to make sure that they don't repeat going forwards, perhaps in a new relationship, so we can look at things, perhaps they're not even aware of things that were glaringly obvious to someone from the outside, particularly if there's been any form of sort of toxicity in the relationship. You don't want them obviously repeating things further down the line. So we look a little bit at the relationship gone by and unpick that slightly, and then we kind of look at the things that are affecting them on that particular day. So a client can be having sort of good days and bad days. You probably see that yourself. So on any given meeting I have with a client, they can have a set problem that certainly wasn't there the week before. So the first question I ask a client is there anything you want to discuss today that's really bothering you? Because that could have arisen out of perhaps a letter they received the day before. So we go through that initially, and then we sort of talk a little bit about how they're feeling, problems have arisen, and work through it, each stage. Clients are very emotional at the very start, and it's just letting them know that they're in a safe space and they can let their emotions out, and I'm trusted and they can tell me anything.
How long would you say on average it takes for people to get through the divorce coaching?
It's a difficult one to say. I mean, on average, I would say most clients are with me between 4 and 6 months. That would be probably average. Again, though, it depends obviously on the length of divorce. I mean, divorces can last a long time sometimes if there's lots to go through. So it depends. And it also depends how that particular client is coping and managing the process. But yes, on average, I'd like to say sort of 4 to 6 months would be good.
Okay. How would you say your work differs from a relationship or divorce therapist?
So the way it differs is sort of therapy and counselling. Obviously, they can look back, and a lot of it sometimes looks at sort of past history, past trauma, looks back at your childhood, your history. I'm not qualified to do that, and a coach very much sticks to what's happening today, here and now, and creates stepping stones to move you forwards. So I would say for me, that is the major difference between what I do. Obviously, we look at feelings and emotions, but they are very much based on the divorce process and how you're feeling about that. I would never look back to something that's sort of not my field, and I sort of very, very careful to stay within my lane. If I really believe that client is struggling due to something that perhaps was from years gone by or from childhood, then I would obviously refer them on to someone who was better placed to be able to help them.
Okay. What's your view on the joined up approach to divorce?
Yeah, so I think this is a really exciting new step, actually, and I'm really pleased that lots of law firms are starting to take this approach. And I think for the right couple, I think it can work really well. And I think it can work really well on a number of bases. What I would say, though, is I think I've got a client at the moment that's going with this approach. I think you have to have very open and honest communication between the pair of you. And I think you've got to have a very transparent idea of where the finances lie. And what I say to this client actually at the moment is you cannot go through this one lawyer, one divorce approach if you're hell-bent on winning. It's not about winning. And I think that's in any divorce, it's not on winning, obviously. But, some people come at it with that mindset of like, I have to get this, I have to get that, I want this, I want that. And there's no talk of anything other than that. And I think if you can kind of approach it with that sort of level-headedness and be able to talk openly and honestly with your ex-partner, I think it can work well. Where I think it might fall down is where there's been perhaps some form of abuse or a highly toxic relationship and communication is completely broken down. it wouldn't perhaps work so well there. Or if there's a massive difference in power levels between the couples, if there's a huge differentials in power, again, it can fall down, but that all kind of falls down to what I was saying before. So yeah, I think it's amazing, and I think it can work really well with the right couple.
How would you say you work with other professionals during a divorce?
So I tend to work more closely with the lawyers or the solicitors of the clients. I have colleagues who work in the finance industry that I'm happy to refer my clients to, but I tend to work less closely with them, more of a referral if anything else. I have clients that ask for me to be CC'd in on emails from their lawyers, just particularly if it's something that could be quite triggering or something that is highly emotional. If they're going through something at the moment they're struggling to deal with, they'll ask for me to be CC'd in on that period, just because I then have a heads up prior to our meeting that week as to what's gone on. Doesn't always happen, but I have had situations where that has occurred. And also things like a formie. I mentioned at the very start that I do help clients fill out a formie, and that's where I might have a bit more involvement with their solicitor, just to get a better idea of when it needs to be submitted by, if there's anything I need to be aware of, special circumstances. So yeah, I'd say the most interaction I would have would be with a lawyer.
Okay.
Or with a client's lawyer.
You don't just do divorce, you are also a breakup coach. So does your advice differ between married couples and cohabiting couples?
Surprisingly, no, perhaps surprisingly, not so much, because a breakup is a breakup, whether you're divorced or not, whether you're married or not. And I kind of find that the emotions are still the same, the feelings are still the same. There could still be property involved, finances are very much still involved, children could be involved. So the pointers are all still very much the same. It's possibly a little bit more complex when they're not married. So on a legal stance, it's perhaps more difficult to unpick. But from my side, no, not. And also, I've dealt with so I live in Cambridge, and I've had a client who's a student at the university who'd been dating their boyfriend for sort of 2 years. And other people might think, well, goodness, why would they need a breakup coach for that? But actually, I'm not here to judge. They were coping really badly. It was their finals. They came to see me. We had a few sessions, and I really helped them move forward. So there is no, going back to what we said before, there is no one typical client, and I don't just deal with people that are married. A breakup is tough, whatever stage you're at, however many years you've been seeing somebody. So it's I don't really have any sort of typical scenario really.
Does your work though encompass co-parenting?
It doesn't encompass co-parenting as such, but as you can imagine, a lot of my work involves talking about the children and how they're coping to my clients. So this can be from the very start. So when the client first comes to me, they're quite anxious about how they might tell the children. The children might not yet know that their parents are getting divorced. And it's that kind of like, how do we go about telling them? Their ex might have a very different message that they want to give than they do. And it's like, how do we come together when sort of perhaps their world's fallen apart, to put this very cohesive message forward to the children. So they come to me and talk to me about that. Equally, things like perhaps the ex might be wanting to introduce the children to a new partner, and also clients struggle with that. How do I cope with that? I'm not very happy about it, the children aren't very happy about it. How can I manage this situation? So we talk about things like that, and I give them various ideas and tools and techniques to get them through. And sometimes we do a little role play about how they can put this message across, and they try it out and see if it works well for them. I think where there's been a lot of conflict in the divorce and communication is completely broken down, and it becomes more tricky. And you obviously want to give a really positive message to the children, but sometimes it's impossible to stand side by side by your ex-partner and put on this cohesive front. It can be impossible. And in those situations, I sort of say, where possible, stick to the written word. So WhatsApp, emailing, things like that. Try to avoid heated conversations on the telephone or in person, because that never really gets anyone anywhere and just causes huge amounts of anxiety all round. There are some amazing apps now. I think one of them I know is Our Family Wizard, which is amazing, and it sort of takes away the need to have detailed conversations with your ex every single day. Everything about the children is on that app, from doctor's appointments to schedules at school, and it just means that the co-parenting schedule just works quite smoothly without you necessarily having to leap on the phone every 5 minutes and make that conversation. And we call it, when there has been quite a lot of conflict, we call it parallel parenting. So you're not necessarily working together, you're sort of working alongside each other, but with the children's best interests at heart. And I sort of say to my clients, what you have to remember is, whilst you might not know what's going on that side of the fence when your children are with your ex-partner, you can't control it. So give up trying to control it, and control what you can control. And what you can control is being a really good parent to your children when they are with you. And I think, you know, that's the message I like to give to them, is just that's what you can control. So you control that as best you can and forget about what's going on over there where possible. It's easier said than done, I know, but where possible, try very hard not to worry too much.
Is there any stage in the divorce where it would be best to get a divorce coach generally?
Not necessarily. I mean, as you might expect, the bulk of my clients come to me when they are starting the divorce process. So I have a lot of clients at the very beginning of the process. I have had clients historically that have been thinking about getting divorced, not sure, perhaps they've been unhappy for a few years. There may have been some form of infidelity, perhaps, that they've just discovered, and they're trying to work out, is it something that they can work around, or is it a no-go area? And they might have a couple of sessions with me to sort of unravel that, and we'll talk about it in more detail. Also latterly, towards the end of last year, I had a client that had actually got divorced, so her divorce had been finalised. She wasn't anticipating it. It wasn't what she expected her future to look like. So she went through the process. I think she described it to me as being on a conveyor belt. So she kind of went along the motions, did as she was told, ticked all the boxes, signed all the forms, and went through it quite, from what she said, went through it quite calmly, kind of took it on board. This is what's happening. It's only when she got out the other side and looked at this brand new life that wasn't anything like she ever imagined. Her children had grown up, they'd moved away from home, and suddenly she was facing a very different life, and really struggled with it. So I think there is no one definite stage. Everybody's different. I would say, yes, the bulk of my clients are going through the process now, but you do have clients either end, so it can be quite varied.
What sort of other support is there out there for divorcing couples?
I mean, that's the thing. You know, there isn't a huge amount. There's quite specific support in the way of things geared towards the children. Perhaps if there's been forms of abuse, is geared towards that. You know, if you're coming out of an abusive marriage. But actually, when it comes down to sort of therapy literally targeted on divorce itself, there's very little. And that's why I think up until now, until sort of people like myself came onto the scene, you know, the divorce lawyer got, you know, was used as the shoulder to cry on. You got everything, you probably still do, you know, everything thrown at you. And, you know, you became their therapist, their lawyer, you know, shoulder to cry on, counsellor, everything. So I think, unfortunately, there isn't a huge amount of help out there. The great thing about divorce coaching is it has grown, the industry has grown, there are more of us around now. And word is getting out that this is what we do and we can help. But no, unfortunately, I would say from my own knowledge, I don't see there's a huge amount of support. I might be wrong, but
no, I agree.
Not enough.
No, exactly. But so what do you think is the one key takeaway you'd like people to remember from today?
I think the one thing I'm really keen to make my clients aware of is the fact that it's absolutely okay to feel the way you're feeling going through a divorce. You know, you can have really bad days, you can feel very emotional, you can cry, you can be angry, you can be resentful, you can feel all of these emotions. Not always the prettiest of emotions, but it's absolutely normal to feel them at any stage in a divorce. It doesn't matter if you're at the end of it or the beginning. What I do say though is it's really important not to stuff those emotions down and keep them to yourself. You need to get them out, and don't let them keep you from being stuck. You know, bad day after bad day after bad day is not moving you forwards. So with the help of someone like myself or a good therapist or counsellor, you can talk through these emotions and get yourself onto a much more positive path towards a happier future. But you know, what I do say to my clients is, you know, you may not have chosen this particular chapter in your life, but you can absolutely make sure you choose the next one, and it's sort of down to you.
Thank you. And thanks for your time today. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
And for anyone who'd like Tori's details, we'll have them up at the end. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.